All right, music fans, welcome back. Harmless Dave here talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly all in one video. And no, I'm not talking about myself for the ugly part, okay? And doing it real time for a few real people out here just like you and just like me. I'm the favorite channel for AI generated copycat channels. Thank you for watching. Thank you for putting me up on your channel. I appreciate that. God bless you, man. God bless the AI and the trolls and everyone else. Thanks. Thanks for being here. If you want to support this channel in the midst of the turmoil, the algorithm, which isn't going to like this video, um, and just the subject matter that I tackle, mixing politics, music, culture, the new Stevie Nicks song, which is burning up the YouTube charts. I'm going to talk about Stevie Nicks thing again. God is dragging me back, kicking and screaming. He's like, you got to talk about this again. I'm like, no, I don't want to. I want to go to Tarshish. I don't want to go to Nineveh. I'm not going to. No, you're going to Nineveh. So I'm going to Nineveh. So buckle up. This is just going to be great. By the way, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, uh, read the book of Jonah. All right. it's it's a quick book. It's hard hitting. And it ends with Jonah still complaining about things, and this is what the human heart is. It's Jeremiah 17:9. All right, the heart is deceitful and wicked above all things. Who can know it? Who can understand it? Not me. Um, and this is pretty much the desire of a lot of people, and a lot of people just don't know. They don't understand that they're being used by a very dark and sinister principality. So the song The Lighthouse, it's opposite day all the time. The song is called The Lighthouse. Jesus is called the light of the world. Notice that? The lighthouse. Well, why is it a lighthouse? So if you click on the video, by the way, it now has almost 400,000 views, released yesterday, trending at number 36 on YouTube. That's amazing. And I don't mean that in a good way. It's just amazing. And it shows you that for some people, this issue, this Stevie Nicks issue, and I got to give Stevie Nicks some credit because she's lived this life. She has no children. And when she could have had a child, she decided not to have that child. It probably would have been a very talented child. But true story, and you can go find this information out. Stevie Nicks thanked the whole Roe v. Wade thing for giving her a career in Fleetwood Mac. She basically said otherwise Fleetwood Mac probably wouldn't have existed, or it would have had to stop, or something to that effect. And she was serious. She thanked this, air quote time, medical procedure. She thanked it for giving her a career. I don't know. Even if you do something like this, and by the way, there is forgiveness. There is definitely forgiveness for anyone who's done this, because God forgives and God forgets, whereas people don't forget. God forgets it as far as the East is from the West. So, let me get into this again. I really don't want to go back to Nineveh. So, trending at number 36. You can go look that up for yourself. From a music standpoint, I noticed that Stevie Nicks kind of sounds like Cyndi Lauper on this song. She just does. Okay, I don't know what's going on vocally with Stevie. Again, she's getting up there in years. I don't know if it's because the song is in a certain key. But she sounds a lot different from her days, especially her big days back in the 70s before all of the cocaine. Her voice changed a lot post cocaine. So she kicked the cocaine, which is good. But some of her other views, I think she's held on to. Like a lot of these people, there is a theme, though, that has really taken root on this political spectrum that she represents. I've noticed that theme centers around violence. Violence. And if you look back in 2020, the people who were in the streets during pretty much that entire year, mostly during the summer, but up until the election, cities like Minneapolis burned down, and many minority owned businesses closed for good. That's Tim Walz, that's his home state. His wife apparently likes the smell of burning rubber, which was wafting through the air during each night of the so-called peaceful protests, which were, according to CNN, they were fiery but peaceful protests. I've noticed that this particular team also supports the never-ending war in Ukraine, where they're sending money to a country that, quite honestly, is very corrupt, who are fighting another country who is also very corrupt. And the result is that hundreds of thousands of people, military age people, and just everybody who's being conscripted into that war, those people are dying because the Russians have a well-trained military and the Ukrainians do not. And we are sending billions of dollars. And Team Nix, this is what she's for. She wrote this poem. You can go look that up, use Google. She wrote this poem about Vladimir Putin and how he's a miserable person and all of the usual sort of Ellen DeGeneres talking points, like without knowing all that much about things. So you don't have to be pro-Putin. You don't have to be pro-Ukraine. You can be pro-peace. How's that? Pro-peace. Jesus was the Prince of Peace. So I'm thinking that something probably could be done to stop that conflict. Now, so there's violence in the streets. There's violence in the foreign policy, and there's violence inside a mother's womb, which should be the safest place for a human being. Well, it's not really a human being. Okay, well, it will soon be a human being. And that raises a really important question. So at what point does a human being, what stage of development does a human being get human rights? When do they become human enough to secure human rights? This is why I think an all or nothing approach is probably the best thing, but you'll never convince anyone that life begins at conception, even though I think from a medical standpoint, that's a pretty solid argument. You know what else is a solid argument? From the book of Jeremiah. The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? Or who can understand it, depending on what Bible translation you're using? Who can understand it? How deceitful and wicked the human heart is. So somehow we've managed to sanitize this and call it healthcare when it's not healthcare. Imagine if a farmer went around ripping out the roots of all of the plants that he's trying to grow for harvest. Nothing would grow. Or if he did it to, say, half of his crop, would he be destroying his harvest? Yes. And in the same token, I don't know how many of these end up in this so-called safe medical procedure that happens. I don't know how many, what the percentage is. I don't know if it's half. I don't know if it's a third. But we're literally losing generations of people. I mean, since this began, I think the number is over 60 million. 60 million. Some would call that a Holocaust. Some would call it a Holocaust. Others would say it's none of your business and have no remorse. And so this all boils down to the heart, the human heart. How do you get realigned with the idea that all life is precious? And again, as I've stated before, there can be exceptions to this rule. There can be cases where something occurs like incest or rape, or truly the life of the mother is at stake, is at risk. Some very hardcore people would come along, and these are the most offensive people to this argument, and say that no matter what, that's a human life. No matter what, no matter how it was conceived, it's a human life. And that's probably God's point of view on this. It's probably his point of view that God can turn something that came from an event or an activity or a union, which was not a good union, and he could turn that person into a world leader, somebody who could change the world in his name for something good. So anyway, I don't want to keep going with this, but I did feel a need to address a couple of things. The song is extremely popular. You're not really going to do anything about this until hearts get changed. Even if laws get changed, which in some states they were, to make it harder to do, or there was a shorter period of time, like 6 weeks or 15 weeks, that's never going to be good enough for certain people. They want no restrictions up until the time of birth, which I think shows how barbaric and how twisted our world has become. Okay. It's either an all or nothing type of issue here. It's either it's a baby or it's not a baby. And the only way you can, I guess, placate your conscience is to believe it's not a baby until it comes out. And then it's a baby, which is ridiculous. I know most states have laws on the books that if a pregnant woman gets killed, that would be considered a double homicide. Why? Why? Based on this, why is that a double homicide? Be consistent. The only thing that determines whether a life is viable or not is someone's brain, someone's mind says, I accept this, I want this. But if that person says, I don't accept this and I don't want this, then that life is no longer a life. It's something else. And they have yet to clearly define what that is and how someone's thought patterns should determine whether someone else lives or dies. See, this is where I just don't get any of this. I'm lost. Once I start really thinking about this, I go, oh, okay. Now, again, this also in light of all these so-called new medications that are available that you can take on the spot. And now in some states, you can have sent to your mailbox. These people, this song pretends that the entire country is under siege, and one man who's moderated his stance on this, but he's guilty of appointing Supreme Court justices who apparently interpreted the law correctly after 50-something years. That's what happened. It's a states issue. They didn't ban it. They said, we're sending it to the states and let the states decide. Each state can do their own thing. That's the way it should work. But we want the federal government to decide everything now. We want the federal government to control states that we don't agree with, where people, by the way, have voted differently. And this way we can get them in line with our way of thinking. So yes, I'm visiting Nineveh. This is not a medical procedure, by the way, because it violates the do not harm principle. It's the last thing I wanted to say about this. Doctors used to take an oath to do no harm. They say they're going to take that oath and then they do this procedure. I'm just being nice about the wording here. So I don't know how that works in this situation. Look, this is never going to be resolved because of Jeremiah 17:9. It's not going to be resolved. People have to have a change of heart. Their, I guess, selfishness needs to be restrained. Now, there are circumstances where this isn't selfishness. There are different circumstances where people feel like it's none of your business what I'm doing. And that's, I guess, what a lot of people are thinking here. That why do you care? What's it to you? Well, we lost a lot of people in a few generations. You would say, well, that's good because, the world is overpopulated anyway. Okay. Well, one of those people could have cured cancer. One of those people could have invented a form of energy that doesn't cost anything. One of those people could have been a great leader to unite people and to be articulate and, just do things that aren't being done today. It seems as though there's a curse, and that curse is worldwide, but that curse is really here in the United States of America. It feels dark. It feels very satanic at times. And the fact that you can release a song called The Lighthouse, which is about death, that shows you that we're in some very dark days. So, a few random thoughts by me as I ramble on here. And this video won't do well. So please, if you can support me over on Patreon, also buy me a coffee, YouTube memberships. I know there are people that hate when I deviate and go off topic here, but I've been doing this for a couple of years at least now. And really, how many times can you talk about Kevin Cronin or I've been covering that and I'll continue to cover things like that. But I see this song trending. I mean, go listen to the song. It's not even a very good song on top of it all. Well, I disagree. I think it's the most important thing ever released by anyone. Jeremiah 17:9. The heart is deceitful and wicked above all things. Who can understand it? Who can know it?